Yes, sir. Good morning to one and all. It is my great honor and privilege to introduce amongst you all Iqbal Singh Chahal, sir. Iqbal sir is an IS officer of the 1989 batch, born on the Maharashtra cadre. An All India merit holder in 10+2, sir completed his BTech from Thapar Institute in Patiala, Punjab. Starting his administrative journey as the Assistant Collector Nashik, sir has had various positions such as CEO Nashik, Collector Aurangabad and Thane, Joint Secretary Ministry of Home Affairs, Government of India, Principal Secretary Urban Development and Water Department, Government of Maharashtra, and is currently serving as the Municipal Commissioner, Municipal Corporation of Greater Mumbai, popularly known as the BN Mumbai Municipal Corporation, and has been instrumental in managing the COVID crisis in Mumbai, making the city a role model not only for India but for the entire world. His efforts have been appreciated by the Director General WHO, the Supreme Court of India, the High Court of Bombay, as well as almost all national and international newspapers and journals. During his career, Sir has been the recipient of many accolades, such as the National Level Computer Society of India E-Governance Award, Citizen of Mumbai Award, Mumbai Ratna Award, and the Maharashtrian of the Year Award for his exemplary public service. Without much delay, I request Sir to kindly address and apprise officer trainees of the 2019 batch of IAS on the Mumbai model of COVID management. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Good morning to all my dear friends, and I'm so happy to be here with you today. And I hope you can hear me clearly.
Yes,
Am
sir,
I
we
clear?
can hear you, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'll come straight to the issue. You know, last year in the month of March, it was the COVID virus hit our country, and to begin with, Kerala and Mumbai became the two hotspots in the month of March 2020, and the first case of COVID was found in Maharashtra on the 11th of March, but it was around 20th March that things started becoming serious. And the primary reason why these two states became the hotspot was between 1st of February 2020 and 22nd of March 2020, when the last flight from anywhere in the world landed in India. In those 52 days, 1.7 lakh international passengers landed in Mumbai at the Mumbai airport, and they were the only carriers of virus from Europe, from Middle East, from other parts of the world. And in Kerala, it was the Middle East immigrants who were continuously moving both ways that the virus came to Kerala. And on the 21st of March, the Maharashtra state had declared the first lockdown for a day, followed by Janta curfew with honorable announced by the Honorable Prime Minister of India for the whole of country. And then from 24th March, if you remember, the whole country went into a long 5-week strict lockdown. Those days, I was working as Principal Secretary Urban Development and Principal Secretary Water Resources Department, which you call as Principal Secretary Irrigation Department. So I was handling both these charges, and the government made me in charge of data collection for the 27 municipal corporations in Maharashtra and 36 districts in the state. My job was to have a Google Excel drive with all these 62 of my colleagues who are all IS officers. And early morning, we could get how many positive cases have been found, how many high-risk contacts were detected, low-risk contacts. Then the issue of quarantining international passengers came who had already come. We had to find them, locate them, and then get after them. Then Tablighi issue came in the first week of April. So basically, I was just doing data collection. So I was attending the various meetings of central government's COVID monitoring teams, which is coming to the state almost on a weekly basis, and I became well aware of this issue thanks to that monitoring. And when the classification issue came of classifying our hospitals into 4 parts, the COVID care centers and the DCHC, district COVID health centers, and the DCH, the dedicated COVID hospitals, and the non-COVID hospitals, this 4 classifications. So I was given the assignment to classify each and every hospital in the state, in every taluka, every district of the state. And this we kept on doing till end of April. But by end of April and first week of May, things were on fire. like in a place like Dharavi, which has 800,000 people in 2.34 square kilometers. So it had become a hot spot with more than 300 cases coming every day. And the death rate had shot up to almost 7.5%. It was very frightening. And people started refusing to meet each other, and everybody was locked in. Although the national lockdown was there, but even individuals became very scared. So on the 4th, 5th, and 6th of May, the Government of India's COVID monitoring team, which arrived in Mumbai, Mr. Lal Agarwal was leading that. And in the debriefing session, they mentioned 16 various points where they found objectionable conduct of the authorities. For example, they were saying that the health workers don't enter into containment zones. So they just go to the exit gate, fill up some forms and come back. The death records are not maintained in crematoriums. And the high risk contact tracing is not up to the mark. So a lot of issues they raised. Every time this COVID monitoring team would come, Honorable CM Maharashtra would take a debriefing session, which naturally I would be present along with the Honorable Chief Secretary, because we need to know from them what their feedback is. So after the 6th May 2020 report, the government suddenly decided to bring me as municipal commissioner on the 8th of May, and I took over around 7 p.m. And that day, things were so bad. We had 3 dead bodies on the road. We had a dead body found in auto rickshaw, on a footpath of Dadar, and in the Dharavi road divider. So things were virtually getting out of control. And when I took over at 7 p.m. and I just rang up my Honorable CM, sir, I've taken over. So he uttered one sentence which put fire into my belly. He said, Chahal, you see, generals are never changed during the war. They're either changed before the war starts or after the war is lost. Because if you win the war, nobody changes general. So he says here, I'm changing you midway. And remember, if you succeed, success is going to be yours. And if you fail, it'll be my failure. No, it was other way around in the normal politicians of the country talk. So he said, I will take over all the failure because people are going to question my decision. So, and if you succeed, the world will say that you have succeeded. So that really shook me. And I just closed my eyes for a minute. I said, I have no choice now. I have only one choice, that is to succeed. So after that, our meeting started, and I had sent a message around 5:30 p.m. that I would like to meet all my team physically, not on the Zoom. Because unless you have eyeball to eyeball contact with your team, only then the message goes loud and clear. Zoom may be a great idea, but it can never replace human direct interaction where you have eyeball to eyeball contact, and commitments come from eyes, not from the mouth, which unfortunately Zoom cannot do it. So I told, so 120 of us, we gathered in the neighboring hall next to my office chamber. Our 24 wards, Mumbai has 24 wards. Then we have 7 zones, the zonal deputy commissioners, joint commissioners, additional commissioners. We have 4 principal secretary rank officers who are additional commissioners, all from their cadre posts. So we all, and then we have 24 health officers at ward level, then zonal health officers. So for those days when nobody was meeting, we met for 5 hours in one hall, 120 of us. And that evening, I knew that individuals cannot perform. It is a team which fights the war. It is the army which fights the battle of the war, not the individual personalities. So I knew that it is the backbone of this fight is going to be a strong team. So I told my team, I said, suddenly, somehow just out of my conscience, it came out. I said, let us chase the virus. So people were taken aback those days that how do we chase the virus, which is invisible and which is life-threatening. And I said, look, I'll tell you how to chase the virus, but before that, there'll be risk to our lives. So I give you 24 hours time to all the team members to opt out. And we have 108,000 employees in BMC. And I said, we will give you some other pushy assignments, but if you want to opt in, then you will have no choice left. But I don't want to risk anybody's life, because if somebody is comorbid or somebody is afraid, then he opts out, and I'll happily opt him out. No grudges against him. So and next morning, then immediately as a demonstration effect, because you have to lead always by examples. So I went straight to a Nair hospital, which is one of the very major hospitals in Mumbai. We call it like a AIIMS of Mumbai. So I directly entered with my 3-4 officers into the ICU of the COVID, where 45 patients were lying, almost 30 were without the ventilators, and rest were on ventilators whom I couldn't talk to. So I spent 53 minutes in that ICU of COVID at 9 a.m. in the morning, next morning. And from there, I went straight to Dharavi. And in that ICU, I spoke to every ward boy, nurse, doctor. I said, this is my cell number, and I'll stand you by like a rock behind you. BMC owns 5 medical colleges and top hospitals for the last 100 years. These hospitals are owned by us. So I told them that we'll all stand by you, and you shouldn't feel that that we are not a strong team. After that, those days, we have 2,300 containment zones in Mumbai. There are about 70 to 80 deaths per day are being recorded. And approximately, we have 4,000 population in one containment zone. So roughly, you can imagine that 12 million people were in the containment zones, 2,300 containment zones. So from there, we walked straight on to Dharavi, and we did a 5-kilometer march in the containment zone for almost 3 hours. And we went to slum houses, we went to public toilets. Because in Dharavi, you have 20-25 seats of a public toilet where 200 people every day share one toilet. And that was a major source of virus infection. So under the chase of virus, number one, we decided that we will enter slum houses, test people on the spot. If anybody found positive, 15 of his family members and neighbors will be picked up by force by deploying buses, and they'll be taken out from there and put in 3-star, 4-star hotels. We requisitioned 187 hotels, 48,000 rooms, and BMC could afford that because we are a well-off organization. And we started moving these 15 people to these hotels. Initially, there was some reluctance, but we used force, and they were kept there for 10 days as high-risk contacts. If they developed symptoms, they would move to the hospital for treatment. If there are no symptoms on day 10, we'll test them with RT-PCR and get them back to the sanitized homes. This was the first step in chase the virus. And we started moving 30,000 people per week. And number 2, we said that these public toilets, which were being sanitized once in 24 hours, we said we'll sanitize them 5 times in a daytime. Almost every 3 hours, they'll be sanitized, so that once somebody uses it, the next batch gets totally sanitized environment. We started killing this virus by chasing in the toilets. Then number 3, we created a concept of community leaders in containment zones. And we said that anybody who's living with his family for years together in a containment zone, only he shall be eligible to be a community leader, not outsider. So and we gave 7 functions to these community leaders after giving them a smartphone, 2,300 of them in 2,300 containment zones, and commissioner's number was given to them. And we said that our ward war rooms will interact with you a couple of times in a day. And if you also interact with them for 7 functions. And if they don't pick up your phone, then your next call should come to the municipal commissioner. And then things will be very tough for the ward office. So number 1, we told them that you have to give us feedback, and we put about a dozen teachers in our ward war rooms to get a feedback from them. Number 1, whether our health workers are actually entering the containment zone and visiting home to home or not. We have 15,000 health workers. Number 2, those days, whether our sanitation team is coming and sanitizing this public toilets 5 times in a day or not. Number 3, whether any comorbid person is left behind by our medical teams, health teams. So if you inform us, because 4,000 population means just about very limited number of families, and person living them for years would know all of them. So if anybody is by mistake left behind by our medical teams, inform us. Our ward teams would come and pick him up and put in the hospital so he doesn't die there. Number 4, we told him that those days we were distributing 900,000 food packets in Mumbai because lockdown was there and a lot of unemployment was there. We had lakhs of daily labor which were without meal, and NGOs came in a big way to help us. So NGOs helped us a lot. So this community leaders were telling us, giving us feedback, the quality of food being served there. Next, we had about 1,500 standalone shops where registered medical practitioners, MBBS doctors operate from a single shop. The shutters were down. We said, we'll give you free PPE kits, 2 for every day, 14 for a week, well in advance. You collect from a ward room free of cost, but open your shops and so-called RMP practices for non-COVID treatment. Somebody having diarrhea, somebody may have snake bite, somebody may have some other ailment. So people should not be devoid of those treatments. And I said, those days PPE kit was costing 2,000 rupees. We started distributing crores of rupees of PPE kits we have distributed. We were distributing 28 PPE kit to one doctor per week. And this went on for months together. So this community leader was to inform us whether those standalone medical practice shops opened up or not, or they've just taken 28,000 rupees of PPE kits and vanished. So this led to opening of hundreds of these RMP practice shops, and people started getting non-COVID treatment also. So we gave them number of functions, and this went on not only in Dharavi, but every slum of Mumbai. And I visited 55 slums in the month of May and June. And I made it a point that there has to be a march. It has to be like at least 1 hour march into these containment zones. It should not be mere photo op, because Mumbai is one place where media is watching you very closely, both international and national. So we would and once they saw that the MC and the senior officers are walking into slums now, others had no choice. So very soon, in a few days, we had 50,000 people of BMC into slums. And this operation started on 9th, 10th, 11th of May, and the 13th of July, exactly in 8 weeks' time, we had moved 1.4 lakh, 5 lakh people, slum dwellers from slums into these 3-star, 4-star hotels. And even after a week, 10 days, the resistance vanished because they were so pleasantly happy to be spending 10 days in a 4-star hotel, free boarding and lodging for 10 days. So there was no question of using force. And this was the best way to disconnect them from the virus and chase it to the finish. And within 2 months' time, exactly around 13th of July, the Director General of WHO, Tedros, came on press conference and they say, now the virus is under control in Dharavi. So this was going on every slum of Mumbai. Now this is what the chase the virus. It has been a game changer. We actually went after it, and after that, when I joined between 8th of May and 8th of June, this was the worst month of my life, of my 32 years career in the IAS, because those days what was happening that we didn't have a dashboard. We had only 3,700 odd beds in BMC and government hospitals in Mumbai, and we had only one control room. And these every day about 1,500 people were coming COVID positive, and test reports were coming after a long delay. I remember the 4th of April reports came on 22nd April before I joined, and the patient whose swab was taken, he had passed away. Even his high-risk contacts had passed away. So things were pretty bad. And in the evening around 7 p.m., when these COVID reports were slapped on the patient through an SMS or email that you're COVID positive, full stop, it will create a panic in the mind of the family or the patient. And he would start calling up people in a city like Mumbai to his friends, who are like honorable politicians or IAS officers or strong people in media or influential people or rich people, and telling them to get him a COVID bed. So naturally, this 1,500 people would generate thousands of phone calls. If one person generates 10 phone calls, it becomes 15,000 phone calls. And in a 30 or 40 line central control room, naturally by 8 p.m. it would collapse. It would get jammed. And then the electronic media would take over, and followed by phone calls from Government of India that what's happening in Mumbai. The control room is dying down, the beds are not available, maybe the beds are finished, the control room is not responding. And finally, Honorable CM would call up, see, Chahal, what happened that there is nobody responding to the bed demands. So this was a horrible experience. And even at 7 p.m., doctors were under a lot of fatigue when the reports would come in, who were supposed to allot these beds. Even they would have harrowing time from 8 p.m., 9 p.m., 10 p.m. And I couldn't sleep the whole night. If the Honorable CM is calling me at 12:30 the night, what do? I can't afford to put my phone off. So I told my team in a week's time, I said, we cannot exist like this. Either we must perform or we have to just vanish from here, because this cannot continue. And I somehow I knew that this is a long fight. It's going to go for years together, if not 1 year, maybe 2 years, 3 years. It's going to go on. It is not something like, it's not a flood or a tsunami or drought which will just go away in 2-3 months time. And so I remember on the 18th of May, we were tremendously short of beds. So first thing, we got the online dashboard, online real-time dashboard made. Today we have 184 hospitals of Mumbai with 23,000 COVID beds, with more than 3,000 ICU, real-time online integrated dashboard of public and private hospitals, which is available on my cell phone. I can see hospital-wise how many beds, which category available where, and it's updated every half an hour. So we have come to the stage, and now it looks so simple. So this dashboard was created. Next was like that, the dashboard is of no use unless you have sufficient number of beds on the dashboard. So we had only 3,700 beds. So I sent in a message on 18th of May to 35 major private hospitals in Mumbai. Mumbai boasts of the best hospital in the country, like Breach Candy, Hinduja, Lilavati, Bombay Hospital, Nanavati, Fortis. So these hospitals, I called these CEOs. And on 18th of May, early morning in New York Times, one report had come up, and I had taken a printout of that. And I told, I read it to these people who had come to me. I said, look what New York Times is writing about us. It said that Mumbai health system has collapsed, dead bodies are on the roads, and in the few weeks, there'll be 1,000 dying on the roads. And I said, look, you people, you private hospitals, you are boasting to be the second Singapore in South Asia for medical tourism, because already a lot of people had started coming from African countries and Middle East, Mumbai, for angioplasty, for kidney ailments, for bypass surgeries, because it worked very cheap for them compared to going to the West. So whenever I would go to these major hospitals, I would see a lot of people from African countries and from Middle East countries flying down 3 hours, 4 hours from Dubai to Mumbai and getting treatment here. I said, look, this reputation is going to go off forever, because if we don't do something, and your dream of becoming the medical tourism hub of South Asia will be crushed, and your reputation will not come back for the next 20-30 years. Tomorrow, if thousands of people die like this. And I said, for this, let us join hands. It was a lot of emotional appeal I made to them. It was over a period of 3 meetings we had, 18th, 20, 21st. And I said, this is a time to serve humanity. This is a time to work together, join hands, and save the reputation of our great city. So they asked me, sir, what do you want? I said, look, number one, I want to take over your 100% ICU and lot it. You will manage the hospitals. I don't want to take over the managements. That time, the thought was going on that we should put one IAS officer in every 35 hospitals, pass the Order and Disaster Act, and take over this hospital. I said, this is not a great idea. We can't run them. All these doctors will flee, and what will the IAS officer do there alone in a big hospital of 1,000 beds? So I shot down the idea of some of my colleagues in our state government secretariat. I said, we have to convince them and take them on board. We cannot push them aside. So I told them, look, you keep managing these hospitals, but you allow me to allot your 100% ICU and 80% of your beds. The remaining 20%, you can charge whatever you want to charge. But these 80% beds, 100% ICU will be government rate 4,000 rupees per bed per day. And I said, your doctors, who are like one of the best doctors in the world in many hospitals, I said they are charging 5,000 rupees for one patient visit for a few seconds in the ward when they visit the doctor after surgery or something. And they just ask you how you're feeling, and the patient says, I'm fine, and just goes away, and 5,000 rupees is charged for a consultancy of the doctor's visit. I said, we'll charge 1 rupee now till further orders, and tell these big doctors that it's time for charity. You won't charge 5,000 rupees, you charge 1 rupee for your ward visit to the patient. And luckily, after a lot of emotional appeal, they agreed, because I told them, I said, you may lose hundreds of crores for the next 1 or 2 years, but your reputation will become so strong that over a period of time, you'll make thousands of crores in medical tourism from the entire African continent and entire Middle East countries. So they decided to surrender me 6,500 of their COVID beds and 424 ICU. Suddenly, dashboard jumped to 10,000 beds of my allotment. On the 21st May, we passed this order. So 21st May, we had 10,000 beds to allot. Next was this control room. So I told my team in those days, one day I said, like, look, every evening we are getting this issue of control room getting jammed, and then everybody starts saying that we don't have beds or we can't allot them. And those days, even in the control room, our person will ring up the concerned hospital, do you have a bed or not? Somebody will say on the phone, no bed available. So that's another story. We didn't have any live data with us. So I told my team, I said, let us abolish this control room. So my additional commissioner said, sir, what are you talking? And on one side, we already, things are on fire, and you are trying to tell us to abolish the only control room in the city. I said, let me complete. Let us have decentralized fight. Let us create 24 Mumbais. Let us have 24 ward rooms. Each ward war room will have 10 doctors, 10 dashboards, 10 ambulances, 10 medical teams, 10 teachers, 10 telephone operators, and 30 telephone lines. I said, we can create this in 15 days' time. So we started the work around 23rd, 24th of May, and 8th of June, they were all functional, these ward war rooms. It was another game changer. Now, to make this ward war room function, it is not merely an air-conditioned hall with a dashboard. You need a number of inputs into that. We have been struggling. This ward war room concept even could not be copied to a neighboring Thane or a Pune or Nagpur, forget what rest of the country. Because a lot of things go into this ward war room. Number one, you should have a fleet of hundreds of ambulances, 24/7. You should have thousands of doctors, because if you have 24 wards, 10 dashboards, 240 doctors in one shift, 3 shifts of 8 hours, 720 doctors, then you need to have reserves. You need 1,000 doctors just doing this work. Then next, you need to have a system where you need to allow, how do you allot the beds? If the first patient is directly getting the reports, there's already chaos in town, they're running around, they will come to you, it won't come to you. Then we took the most courageous decision ever. And it was in the first week of June, we issued written orders under Disaster Act to all the test labs. And we're the only one city in the world today. I repeat, we're the only one city in the world where the test report of a positive COVID patient does not flow from the lab to the patient. And we have handled 700,000 such reports till now. Mumbai had 100,000 positives in the first and second wave put together. All these reports have come first at midnight to BMC. And it is us who declare open these reports to the patient. Patient doesn't have direct access to COVID positive report. And there's no second city in the world where the system prevails. This has a lot of advantages, but there's a high risk involved. Just imagine if even one patient had missed his report through us and he had died, he would have sued us that he couldn't get treated. because he didn't get a report only. His swab was collected, but the lab was debarred in writing from giving a report to him. And had we lost his report somewhere, and had he passed away, he would have gone to the court saying that, look, I couldn't get treated, my patient couldn't get treated, or my brother or sister or my family member couldn't get treated for 3, 4, 5 days. Report was not available. We were crying and shouting and asking for a COVID bed. Nobody was giving us COVID bed because we didn't have the report. And now it is BMC who is responsible for our death because they lost our report. So we have to be accurate, like a razor sharp accuracy. So we passed that order. We said, henceforth, from 1st of June last year, no patient shall directly get, and no lab will directly give a report to a COVID positive patient. And we also mentioned in that order that if somebody does it, we'll cancel the license of that lab. So it took us a week, 10 days time to enforce this stern discipline. And we told the hospitals, I said, if somebody comes to you with a lab report clandestinely, you don't have to allot a bed to him, or we'll take action against you. We disconnected that patient hospital connect. And every night at midnight, for all swabs taken from 000 hours to 2359 hours, we would get a single line list at 12 midnight and 6 a.m. in the morning later on now. And all 56 labs in Mumbai, even if we had 11,000 positives on a particular day, they came in a single line list to us. Then from midnight to early morning 6 a.m., we have scores of doctors in BMC headquarters in Abbott cells sitting from 12 midnight to 6 a.m. We clean the list. Now, what is cleaning the list? There are many RT-PCR tests conducted to discharge the patient. There are many RT-PCR tests which may be from the neighboring district. By mistake, it has come to us. For example, if you know Mumbai, Navi Mumbai is not Mumbai. Mira Bhayandar is not Mumbai. So BMC jurisdiction is not co-terminus with the so-called Mumbai. So these reports we transfer to those districts like Thane or Raigad or Palghar. And then 6 a.m., the list is cleaned up. And at 7 a.m., the software splits the list into 24 parts automatically. And they appear on the 240 dashboards. For example, if you have 1,000 cases today or 10,000 cases today, of 1,000 cases, each ward gets about 40 cases and each dashboard gets 4 cases only. If you have 10,000 cases in a day, each dashboard gets 40 cases. Tomorrow, if you get 20,000 cases in a day, each dashboard gets 80 cases. So once the doctor allots 4 or 40 or 80, handles 4 or 40 or 80 patients, a list of 20,000 will disappear by afternoon. So like today morning, we got about 500 cases. So each ward will get about 20 cases. Each dashboard will get about 2 cases. One may be like a home quarantine issue. So he allots 1 bed and the list finishes by say 11 o'clock. So now, once we these lists appear on these dashboards, at 8 a.m., the doctors start calling up the patients and breaking open the news that who is positive in the city. Till that time, except BMC, nobody in the world knows in Mumbai who is positive for that particular day. Now, we needed 1,000 doctors for this. From where to get the doctors? Those days, like we already were falling short of doctors in jumbo hospitals. With 9,000 beds we created there, 7 jumbo hospitals. So it's not easy to suddenly generate or create or manufacture doctors. I used to be Secretary Medical Education, Government of Maharashtra in 2011 and 12. So I knew Maharashtra had 55 medical colleges, government and private put together, with a batch of 200 every year. So 11,000 interns were sitting homes in lockdown those days. So they were getting 11,000 stipend. These are the boys and girls, young 19, 20, 21 years old, who have done their 3 profs, 4.5 years, and now they are supposed to do that 1-year internship before they get their MBBS degree. So they're all sitting home, all over Maharashtra. We started a WhatsApp campaign. We said, join us. We will give you 50,000 rupees per month, 5 times almost of your stipend. We'll give you air-conditioned environment to work. We'll give you non-COVID work. We'll put you in 5-star hotels with free boarding and lodging. Those days, all 5-star hotels were lying empty. Nobody was there. So we said, you come and join us, get 50,000 rupees, get free boarding and lodging in a 5-star place, walking distance from your workplace, and you work in an air condition and you do non-COVID work. So 1,100 boys and girls joined us. And people, these young boys, 19, 20, 21, from tribal areas, from rural areas, from backward areas like Beed, Osmanabad, Nandurbar, Yotmal, Latur, Osmanabad, they joined us, and they were so, I salute them, and they did awesome work. They were staying in JW Marriott, they were staying in Taj Palace hotels, and they were too happy to be staying there. And they were working so hard, they didn't want to lose this assignment. And they're still with us, many of them. So they took over this 240 dashboards into 3 times in a day, because the job was to announce who is COVID positive and talk to them. And 8 o'clock, these doctors will start calling up. And supposing I'm COVID positive, we trained them. You will not believe that I took the training myself on the Zoom in the first week of June. I said, Mr. Chahal is COVID positive. At 8 a.m., you have to give a call. Yes, sir, good morning. This is so-and-so from ward war room of so-and-so ward. Sir, I'm very sorry to inform that you are COVID positive, but sir, don't worry. We are with you. Ambulances, doctors, beds are waiting for you. Tell me how you're feeling now. So if he says, I have no symptom, I have unsymptomatic, and I'd like to be home quarantined, he said, okay, sir, we'll call you 5 times in a day, every day till you become COVID negative. And if you develop symptoms, please ring us up, or we'll keep on talking to you. If you develop symptoms after 2, 3, 4 days, we'll come to your home with your ambulance, we'll pick you up, a lot bed at your residence, and put you in the hospital bed. And somebody who's saying that, he says, Mr. Chahal says, look, I am dying, I need a ventilator bed, and give me a bed fast. So we'll say, okay, sir, we are just reaching your home. We have our 10 ambulances and 10 medical team PP kits ready. They'll start moving. Since ward is the world for them, they can reach anywhere in 20 minutes because they don't go outside the ward. So they reach the patient's home, with pulse oximeters, they check their temperature, they check oxygen level, they check their medical condition. And it is then this team or us who decide what category of bed is entitled to. He may be honorable minister, he may be rich as the rich, he may be poor as the poor. There's great social equity here. It is we who decide. Supposing they come to my house and I said, I want a ventilator bed. They'll say, sir, your oxygen level is, saturation level is 97, 98. You don't even need oxygen bed. Forget about ventilator bed for you. We'll give you normal COVID bed. If somebody is genuine, we give them ICU bed. So the medical team from this residence of the patient rings up the ward room doctor, who has the dashboard in front of him. We try to adjust his choice, whether he wants a private hospital or government hospital. Government hospital is free, private was 4,000 rupees per day, even like Breach Candy. Earlier, it would charge 4 lakh rupees a day. We made it to 4,000 rupees a day. And it continues today also. Despite the fact that they've taken a hit of more than 1,000 crore rupees, but they're still serving with a smile today also. These now 142 hospitals have joined us, those instead of 35. So the bed is allotted and announced to the patient through the medical team at his residence. And the medical team says, okay, sir, we'll wait for 10-15 minutes. You get ready. You come with us. We'll drop you in the hospital bed now. The patient is picked up, taken to the hospital, and the hospital management has no role to play in admission. Our municipal auditors are sitting there. We do the admission in all this 182 hospitals. So the patient goes straight to the bed. We started lotting bed with bed numbers. For example, if KM hospital is there and Mr. Chahal is allotted oxygen bed, so KO25 is my bed. So KM oxygen bed number 25 is allotted to me. And I come to know sitting at my home, and I go in that ambulance and I'm dropped straight on that bed. And then the medical team rings of the ward war room doctor, sir, this patient has been now disposed of, he's in the bed now. And by 2 p.m., 3 p.m., the entire city is settled. So it works wonders, because if we had not taken the test reports in our control, it was not possible to control this crowd who had spread into the market, and they may not have come to you, they've gone somewhere else. So we called it chase the patient policy. We said we are going to chase the patient right from his test report result to putting him in the hospital bed. And plus, we'll take care of the home quarantine people till they become COVID negative. So the next component came doctors. Then we need ambulances. When I joined, we had 80 ambulances. Today we have 1,000. And I had 825 in 7 days. You know how, like, all of you will be working as now returning officers, as SDOs and district collectors when you go to the field to conduct Vidhan Sabha elections, Lok Sabha elections. And in these elections, you need thousands of vehicles. I was collector for 8 years, from 96 to 2004, Aurangabad 4 years, Thane 4 years. So we conducted number of Lok Sabha, Vidhan Sabha elections. So supposing we needed 3,000 vehicles for almost 4,000 polling stations in the district. Maharashtra has big districts. So we would tell the transport commissioner or the RTO that you give me requisition the vehicle and give it to me. So I told, on the similar lines, I told the state transport commissioner, I said in 3 days, I need 800 Innovas and Sumos. And the drivers and the Sumos were too happy to join us because they're sitting in lockdowns, there's no employment. Because many of these vehicles are owned by individual drivers. So they started getting money from us. So in 5 days, we got 800 Novas and Sumos. We took it to our BEST workshop, the Bombay Electricity Supply and Transport. BEST is a sister concern of BMC, who runs 4,000 bus service, local bus service in Mumbai. So in the workshop, we just put a compartment which separates the driver's component from the rest of the vehicle. Aluminum sheet was put and it became ambulance. We gave the driver 7 days advance PPE kit if he wants. Still, he's not safe with the partition. And suddenly we had 800 ambulance functioning. I said, COVID patient don't need stretchers. They just need to sit in the ambulance for 20 minutes and go to the hospital from the residence to the hospital. But still, somebody who really needed a stretcher, we got 50 mini buses of BEST and converted them in our workshop in the next 15-20 days into a stretcher ambulances. So suddenly we had 25 ambulances by the time this ward room started functioning. So we parked 240, 24 and 10 here, another hundreds of ambulances in COVID care centers because the poor slum dwellers, they cannot be home quarantined. They don't have independent bathroom. So those people, we had created another 24,000 COVID care. We had 2 types of COVID care centers, Triple C1 and Triple C2. Triple C1 was 48,000 beds, high-risk contacts, hotels. Triple C2 was asymptomatic positive from slums or those lower middle class who don't have independent toilet in their homes. So they are asymptomatic positive. Under MBBS doctor, we put them in Triple C2. And if their condition deteriorates, they move within the ambulances to the major hospitals. We had ambulance links at all these 24,000 bed facilities of Triple C2. So then this is how ambulances came, doctors came, dashboard came, then the medical teams came, and the war room started functioning and the reports started coming to us. And I'm so happy to share with you that till today morning, we had 7.13 lakh cumulative COVID patients since last March. And starting from June, virtually, if you leave about 10,000 reports, remaining 700,000 reports have gone through BMC. And there's not been a single miss. Because I said it's a software, it's a technology. Everything, there's no human intervention. It comes in email, software splits it, it appears in dashboard. There's no reason why some name should get disappeared. It's just like you saying that you deposited money in a bank and some of the entries missing. It cannot happen. So we were very sure that no name can get missed out and nobody can sue us. And it is working so well that number one, it doesn't create any panic in the city that once somebody gets COVID positive report, 10,000 of them, they don't run around. And secondly, it is on our selfish interest fulfilled because we virtually make that COVID positive patient captive by catching him at his home. And then under our supervision, he's put in the COVID hospital. He doesn't get any opportunity to spread this virus outside his home. Otherwise, if you slap 11,000 reports on these patients, these 11,000 people start moving in the market, in the taxis, they start moving from one hospital to another hospital, seeking a hospital bed. By the time they get a bed, they would have infected many others. And next day, they become our headache only to give them beds to them also. So this system started working very well. So in this change the patient policy, we got sufficient number of beds through private hospitals. And I must tell you that this public-private relationship in Mumbai, where 142 hospitals are giving to us, they're almost 12,000 beds at 4,000 rupees a day. It is unique concept in the country. Nowhere I know that it is functioning so smoothly. And we have debarred this 23,000 beds in the hospital. Even a single bed cannot be allotted by the hospital themselves. Whether it's a Beach Candy, whether it's a Reliance Hospital, whether it's Kokila Ben, no hospital is allotted by the management. Every bed is allotted by the BMC. If some serious patient comes directly, he gets admitted, but the ward war room has to be informed, and our dashboard has to be uploaded with that. Now, another very important function was, now once this ward war room is functioning, unless these dashboards are regularly updated every half an hour, we come to know who's discharged, who's admitted. Again, they'll become malfunctional. So this is where young IAS officers came to our rescue. We deployed, we have 5 major BMC owned hospitals: KM, Nair, Sion, Seven Hills, and Cooper. And then we have 13 peripheral hospitals who are all equally big. So we brought 6 IAS officers of the rank of collectors and we created war rooms in these hospitals. 1 in KM, 1 in Nair, and 1 in Sion, 1 in Cooper, 1 in Seven Hill, and 1 for peripheral 13 hospitals put together. So we told, they were again given 6 functions. And because those days in lockdown, 90% of the bureaucrats were sitting home without work. Mantralaya was closed. So we got them out, and Honorable Chief Secretary appointed them to assist us. So we said each IAS officer would create a war room in the hospital. Number 1, he'll be given data entry operators, and they will upload and update the dashboard every half an hour. And an IAS officer will ensure that if anybody is getting discharged, admitted, they will keep track of it. Then they shall get every bed on the CCTV camera. And this, I'll tell you how it really helped us. So every bed was brought under CCTV camera by putting CCTV cameras by these young dynamic IAS officers who did a great job. Number 3, the hospital's bed numbering, whether they're ventilator beds, oxygen beds, normal beds, they're numbered so that we can allot bed with bed numbers right from the control room. Next, we told these IAS officers that you must keep these washrooms of our municipal hospitals, government hospitals, spick and span, clean. They also must be sanitized 5 times in a day. Otherwise, I need not say what the condition normally is. So the next function was the canteens in these hospitals virtually got shut down because the people who run the canteen, they are all fled because of COVID. And the patients' relatives won't even have a cup of tea in the hospital the full day. They will be hanging around. So we told the IAS officers that you make this canteen functional. We'll get you a lot of NGOs who will give you a lot of stuff free of cost. Like Parle company, they would bring us tempo load of biscuits every day. They will dump it. The Taj Hotel would get sandwiches and they'll dump in a tempos. So there's no dearth of eatables, but they have to be properly managed. So these young IAS officers, they made these canteens functional, and at least the relative who would be around in a hospital campus, he would sit there and have some snacks. He could have some tea or coffee. So though they become functional. Then I said, generally, like government hospitals are very shabby. Some medicines come, the cartons are lying somewhere in the ground, or they are in the corridor. So I said, you must ensure that hospitals are spick and span. Then next was that if the small repair involved somewhere, some tap is leaking, or something is leaking, or some room has something to be done, these IAS also do that. And I said, please don't disturb the deans and the principals of these colleges. You set up your war room in the engineering section of the government or a hospital, a BMC hospital. So these war rooms started functioning, and then we gave them a number of other functions. The best was that those days we would get a lot of social media videos. 2 guys lying in one bed, somebody lying on the floor, or dead body lying to a live patient on a bed. So we never knew whether this video belongs to Mumbai, whether this video is from other place, whether this video is old or it is yesterday's or today's. So this would bring a lot of bad name and perception in the mind of the common man, what's happening. So we did a system where we made these social videos a history in Mumbai in the last more than 1 year. In the second wave, there's not a single video of Mumbai which could be seen anywhere in the world on the social media. The reason being, the credit goes to young IAS officers. We told the young IAS officers that, look, if any such video appears, First of all, we made a dozen young clerks of BMC sit in a control room in headquarters of BMC, where we put dozen TV channels. They would keep on viewing the TV channels. If any adverse news of BMC comes, they'll report to a nodal officer who will report to me, and will immediately flash it on or forward it on WhatsApp to the concerned IS officer who was supposed to conduct an inquiry and give a factual report to us, that whether it's true, and if it's true, we'll apologize and we'll correct ourselves. But if it's false, we'll immediately issue a strong rebuttal. So if many times the stakeholders, the citizens, the opposition leaders would directly send me WhatsApp on send me a adverse video on my WhatsApp, I would simply forward it to the concerned IS officer. Supposing that there is something is saying that in Sion Hospital, the two guys lying on one bed, something on the floor. So I would simply forward that WhatsApp video to the concerned IS officer of Sion Hospital in the war room. He would immediately conduct inquiry into that and report back, and I'll again forward it to the person from whom it had come. So once they knew the system is in place, and they cannot just get away by making an allegation. So the number of videos started declining, and ultimately they vanished. And if like one day, Honorable Cabinet Secretary of India rang me last July saying that there's a report in a newspaper in Delhi that 16 people have died in a Jogeshwari hospital that because of oxygen leakage there. Ms. Radhakrishnan, an IS officer who is the Municipal Commissioner of Nagpur, he was my in charge of my peripheral hospitals. So the moment I forwarded him that report, he rushed to that hospital. He found it's not true. So he sent me a detailed report on WhatsApp. I forwarded to the Honorable Cabinet Secretary of India, and the Honorable Cabinet Secretary was so happy that in 2 hours' time, we have given him the inquiry report. So this system was created, which exists today also. And now people really are afraid to circulate a video for Mumbai because they know that we'll catch them and we'll get the facts straight away. And we have system on autopilot to take care of the social media videos. So these IS officers did a great job. And then later on, in the first wave, cases started coming overcharging private hospitals. So we created email links of the citizens for these IS officers. Anybody getting overcharged, they would send an email to him or her, who would conduct an inquiry. And in the first wave, 1,400 people complained for overcharging, and we refunded them 18 crore rupees, even a month after they were discharged. And in the second wave, we created another system where there was zero complaint of overcharging. In the second system, in the second wave, which brought 400,000 cumulative COVID positive between 10th of February and 31st of May, we put 2 municipal auditors in every hospital, all 142 of them. And any bill at the time of discharge for the patient will be first vetted by a municipal auditor. The draft bill was given to us. Unless we vetted it and cleared it, it will not be released to the patient. And because of this, in the second wave of 400,000 people, there was no complaint of overcharging because our auditors would first clear the bill before it is released to the patient. And that system operates now. So because of this, the dashboard updation and general administration of government-run BMC-run hospitals improved. So the IS officers did a great job in streamlining these processes. Now, those days, when I joined, I found that dozens of my colleagues already passed away in BMC in March, in April, in the first week of May. So within 48 hours of joining, I knew what the importance of team morale. So I said that if now we don't do something, ultimately the team's morale will go down. And we had number of people who were not frontline workers who had passed away, our colleagues, because the government had an insurance policy of 50 lakh rupees insurance policy was only for health workers and frontline workers. Like our bus drivers of BST who would transport these paramedicals and doctors from hospitals to the residents and back, they would catch up COVID and they would die. We have lost 187 bus drivers in Mumbai. So they were not getting covered in the insurance scheme. So within 3 days of joining, I passed a very brave order. I said, anybody in BMC who would unfortunately pass away, he would get 50 lakh rupees compensation from BMC coffers. No insurance, no assistance, no insurance, nothing from the state government. We will pay ourselves. And I passed this order with retrospective effect. 1st of March 2020. I said 1st of March 2020, if anybody has passed away, even he'll get it. We lost 301 people. We had 9,000 plus COVID positive cases. We distributed 150 crore rupees to our employees, 50 lakh cash, whether it's a chief engineer, whether it's a deputy commissioner, whether it's a ward officer who had passed away, whether it's a sweeper. Everybody gets 50 lakhs, same amount, and a service to the next of the kin. This really encouraged our team, and it's such a motivated team. I always say that they can take a bullet for me. They are so loyal and dependable. So this also, I don't see any other state of the country or any other municipal corporation who have even copied us, that they'll pay 50 lakh compensation from their own funds if their employee passes away. So this also has really charged up our team, and the families feel secure, and the employees feel secure that somebody is there to stand by them if something happens to them. We had one ward officer who passed away. We had one chief engineer who passed away. We had one deputy commissioner. So we have more than 300 casualties. That's why it's a war. It's a war going on. Our casualties are going to hundreds. It has gone to hundreds, and it is true of almost all states, all places around. Then, between 8th of May and 8th of June, I found that India has limited testing, and we can't match the West, where 50,000 tests were happening every day in Germany in the last May 2020, and we were doing only 4,000 tests because we didn't have labs. And although today we have 56 labs, we can do 100,000 tests, but those days we could do only 4,200 tests in a day. But we had a large number of cases. So how do we match up and ensure that we reduce mortality? Because if we don't do testing enough, people are going to die. They're not going to wait for our testing. So by that time, in the first week of June, our jumbo field hospitals got ready. And we created 7 greenfield jumbo hospitals in open playgrounds with ICU beds and dialysis beds and 70% oxygenated beds and huge oxygen storage tanks there. Even for a week, if oxygen is not there, the tanks can take care of that. So this 9,200 beds got created in 7 jumbos in BKC, in Mulund Toll Naka, in Daisar Toll Naka, in Nesco Goregaon, in Richardson Kudas. So we created these jumbos. And one day an idea struck me. I said, let us reserve 2,000 beds in the jumbos, all oxygenated beds only. We gave the directions to the deans that there'll be walk-in entry on these beds, 2,000 beds. And we went for aggressive publicity in electronic print media and through our ward war room, that any citizen feeling unwell, gasping of breath, he need not wait for his test report or a swab to be collected. So he should take auto rickshaw, he should take a taxi, he should take an ambulance, he can take a bus, whatever. He should simply walk into the jumbos. And the deans would welcome them. They will be put on this oxygenated beds. They'll be given oxygen, stabilized. Their test would be taken. If found positive, they'll move to a COVID section after a day. If they found negative, they'll establish and send back home. 20,000 lives we saved like this. Even today, when I talk to you, we have 400 people on the suspected beds who simply walk in and occupy this bed. They are as good as oxygen parlors with specialist doctors in the jumbo hospitals. So, and just imagine if I had to identify this 20,000 people, and with the positivity of say about 10%, I would have to do 200,000 tests. And many of these 20,000 people would never have died because death wouldn't have waited for it. But now in this system, anybody unwell or somebody's swab is taken, he need not wait for the report to come. He should just take auto rickshaw and walk into this centrally air-conditioned, centrally Wi-Fi jumbo hospitals of at least 1,000 beds at every place. We have the world's largest jumbo hospital, which we claim, and rightly so, 3,000 beds in Nesco Goregaon, 224 ICU, dialysis beds and 70% oxygenated beds. So these 2,000 oxygenated walk-in entry beds again became a game changer, and we could literally match any other country in controlling our mortality. And because of this, in this second wave from 10th of February to 31st of May, we got 3.93 lakh cases, COVID cumulative COVID positive, and we had 3454 deaths. 3454. This works to be 0.8% mortality. I claim this is one of the lowest anywhere in the world. And I've been telling this in my interviews to foreign media. I said, New York, Los Angeles, London may be talking about their super specialist system or their high class healthcare, but our mortality rate is better than yours. So this and even the suspected beds played a very major role in controlling this mortality. Then last year, another issue. One day, what happened that last year, that I said that 1 month of mine, which was horrible. Our one of our honorable MPs, he passed away, member of parliament, and I suddenly got a call from honorable former chief minister. My former CM called me. He said, Chahal, our MP from our party has passed away, and his body is lying at a crematorium, and can you help him in early cremation? So when I called up the ward, he said, sir, there are 5 of the dead bodies there, and there's a huge crowd there, and if you jump the queue, there'll be law and order situation there, and we couldn't do anything. We had to wait. So that night when I went home, I felt very disturbed. I said, look, I never imagined in my life that an ex-chief minister would call me to cremate somebody early. I said, this cannot go on. So next day I went to IIT Mumbai. So I told IIT Mumbai, I said, do something about this. They created a dashboard for me. We have 47 crematoriums in Mumbai. We can cremate about 1,450 people every day, but we never had more than 70 deaths in a day in the peak time also. So now we have dashboard. If Mr. Chahal's relative dies in, say, Beach Candy or a KM hospital or a Sion hospital, the doctor calls me. He said, sir, tomorrow, what time suits you for cremation? We have a dashboard, and of 47 crematorium, first give us choice which crematorium you'd like to go. And second, supposing I want to go to Chandanwadi in D ward in Malabar Hill. So this, okay, sir, just wait a second. There is one slot from 11 to 12, another slot from 4 to 5 available. Which one you want? I said, okay, give me 4 to 5. So 3:55, I reach there with my family members. I get full privacy. Nobody else is there. The dead bodies arrives at 3:55. I have dedicated time of 4 to 5. So the cremation takes place, and I leave by 5:45. The next person comes in. So we give total privacy to the patient's relatives for cremation, and there is zero queuing. I can challenge that in the second wave, there is not even a single picture or a video of any cremation in Mumbai where crowding was there. Unlike many cities, other cities where this images had become very common. Because in our system, the crowding cannot exist. And if we have a capacity of 1450 cremations per day, and we are getting about 30, 40, 50 deaths per day, it's very easy to handle them. But this IIT Mumbai dashboard really helped us. Now, another thing which I always claim, like I always say, Mumbai model is a combination of 26 submodels, and I never see any paper. I never read any paper when I speak. You know, we had another problem. When I joined, I was told that Mumbai has 10,000 people who do not have kidneys. They are on permanent dialysis, and unless their dialysis takes twice a week, they will not survive. So one of my friends passed away in the month of April. So the family was kept on shouting that, look, our relative passed away because his dialysis didn't happen on a COVID bed. Hospital report said that he has died of COVID. Because he was in isolation, nobody was allowed to meet him. And he was put in a body bag and cremated. Nobody knew what had happened to him. So I had a suspicion that he must have died for non-dialysis. So immediately I gathered this data that we have 10,000 people, and every day 15 to 20 of them become COVID positive. So unless we take care of dialysis on every COVID bed, they will not survive, because they may be COVID positive for 10 days, 14 days, 21 days, but dialysis cannot wait. So I got together 70 nephrologists on a Zoom meeting, and I made a very emotional appeal to them. I said, please join hands and do something. So we have one Apex Kidney Foundation. They said, okay, sir, those days we had 103 hospitals functioning I'm talking of 21st of May last year. It happened in 10 days. So they said, sir, you send your 103 technicians to us. We'll train them for 3 days in our foundation. And you put them each of these in 103 hospitals. And we'll reorganize machines that each hospital must have at least one machine. Some would have 2, but definitely one dialysis machine. So we started on 24th of May, this new system. And IIT Dashboard, IIT Mumbai again came to our rescue. They gifted free of cost an online portal to us, covidialysis.in. Now, Mr. Chahal doesn't have kidneys, and he ends up in COVID hospital, in Rajawadi hospital, or some Bal Thackeray hospital, or some Shatabdi hospital. The moment I go on my bed, I'll ring up my doctor, my family doctor. So I'll say, sir, I have become COVID positive. I'm so and so hospital. He'll tell me, hold on the phone. He'll open the dash portal and he'll say, okay, in your hospital, that machine, one machine or 2 machines are there. Tomorrow, 1 to 2 p.m. and say 7 to 8 p.m. 2 slots available. Which one you want? I said, okay, give me 1 p.m. He punches it and I get an SMS on my cell phone, sitting on my COVID bed. I have to show that to the technician posted there. He'll come tomorrow 1 p.m. and do my dialysis. We have done 2150 handle such people, and not even one has died because of non-dialysis. We called it Project Victory. And I presented it to the Honorable Cabinet Secretary of India, and I said with a lot of responsibility, I said, nowhere in the world this exists. And I said, in this system, not even one person who's in permanent dialysis, his life will be at risk. He may die because of COVID, unfortunately, but he will not die that his dialysis didn't take place. This was another model which now, even more serious case was, supposing Mr. Chahal doesn't have kidneys, and I am going to say Hinduja Hospital every day for my dialysis twice a week. And one day I go there and I start coughing. The hospital is going to shoo me away. They say, look, you are looking suspected. You get a COVID negative report, otherwise we won't do your dialysis today. Now, what do? My dialysis is important. And if my dialysis doesn't happen in 48 hours, I'm going to die. I don't have a COVID positive report. The COVID hospital will not entertain me. And the negative also wants a negative report I do not have. So this other non-COVID hospital is not allowing me to have my dialysis. What do? We created suspected hospitals, 2 of them in Mumbai, one in Ghatkopar, one in Chembur. The moment, say, a hospital like Hinduja will refuse to do my dialysis, assuming that I'm suspected case, I don't need to wait for my swab to be collected, report to come. I will again ring up my family doctor. Okay, sir, he's not now doing my dialysis today. So he'll say, okay, wait. He will open that portal and reserve a slot for me in those suspected centers. I'll simply drive down there. Even they have received a SMS once it is punched. They'll do my dialysis, they'll sanitize the machine and wait for the next patient to come. So the suspected category also was greatly helped because he need not wait for swab to be collected, report to come before dialysis could take place. So this also became an inherent part of that Project Victory or dialysis facilities for COVID positive patients. Then the next issue was the shortage of doctors those days. So I requested Honorable CM, and he made a Facebook appeal to retired Army, Navy, Air Force doctors from and paramedicals from state government, central government retired. We got 536 of them, and we deployed them in 7 jumbo hospitals, 9,000 beds, and they're working there today also. And we gave them handsome salaries, 80,000 rupees for MBBS, 200,000 rupees for a specialist doctor. Then we had a lot of shortage of nurses those days to run the jumbo hospitals. So I took out 2nd year and 3rd year nursing girls and boys, and we started giving them full salary, and we deployed them in jumbo hospitals. We got 600 nurses suddenly. Final year, especially final year nurses came and chipped in. So this is how we got our medical staff deployed for jumbo hospitals. Then another two good models which we did was when we created 600 plus ICUs in jumbo hospitals. We didn't have specialist doctors to run them, anesthesia or somebody interventionist or critical care doctors. We didn't have, because everybody was under so much stress. So we did a new experiment. We came with the expression of interest, and we said a lot of doctors with nursing homes, private clinics, non-COVID, who are lying shut and are lying holed up in their homes, please join hands, come and run our ICUs. As per Medical Council of India norms, you deploy the manpower, and we'll give you medicines, we'll give you every equipment absolutely free. You quote per bed how much you want. We got 4 bids for the 600 plus ICU, 612 ICU, and the quote was 7,000 rupees per bed per day with 50% minimum guarantee. And since last September till now, I'm talking to you, not even one BMC employee is deployed on the 600 ICUs. They're all being run by professionals. And we give them remdesivir, we give them tocilizumab, we give them favipiravir, we give them every possible medicine. They don't have to spend even a penny. They just have brought manpower strictly as per Medical Council of India norms, and they're running the show. And at the peak time, when, for example, BKC Jumbo Bandra Kurla complex had 108 ICU, if all were occupied, so they were getting roughly 7 lakh rupees a day, 2 crores a month to run the show. So the doctors also were very happy and they're making good money. Then it is human nature that in our country, people trust private hospitals more than government hospitals, BMC hospitals. So what we did is we created a system of mentorship. I have outstanding relationship with my private hospital CEOs. I can tell you that if I call them, they pick up my phone on the first dial, whether it's Breach Candy or anybody, because we have built up personal relationships, WhatsApp groups, and we have been respectful to them. So we created system mentorship. Now, supposing we had a jumbo hospital in Worli Dome, the nearest 2 hospitals, Bombay Hospital and Breach Candy, in Bandra, Lilavati and Hinduja, in Goregaon, Nanavati, in Mulund, Forties and Wokhard. So I told this hospital, I said, some of the doctors, you kindly share your numbers with our doctors in jumbos, and you guide them on telemedicine 24/7. So we got 35 top doctors in the country acting as mentors to our jumbos. And our doctors in jumbos, they can always call them, make them video calls, because our jumbos are central Wi-Fi with all facilities. So they get consultation and advice from these doctors from the private hospitals. And now, out of charity, top doctors from this private hospital, they started visiting on Sunday or holiday these jumbos totally on an honorary basis. Now, when we are allotting a bed to a patient from a ward room, we tell him, look, if you're going to BKC, Bandra, doctors of Hinduja and Lilavati will be there to watch your health. They'll be available for your advice. So people feel very reassured that, look, they are in double safe hands now. So the mentorship of 35 top doctors who are jumbos, it has also worked very well. And now we are building 4 new jumbos for these are pediatric jumbos. I'll come to that for the third wave, prospective wave, where we are telling these private hospitals to take over these jumbos fully and let them be extension of Breach Candy, extension of Bombay Hospital, extension of Hinduja, and let them run this entire show. We'll give them everything. So people feel reassured that this is extension of that top hospital. So I'll come to that little later. So we did a lot of these experiments in those days. And after that, when the first wave starting ebbing out in the month of September, October, we came with a very noble idea. We call it My Family, My Responsibility campaign. We said, unless millions of our citizens join in, no model or no fight can succeed. And their role is equally important. So we had 3.5 million families in Mumbai. So we decided that our 15,000 health workers will enter each of these homes. Between 15th of September and 15th of November, in 60 days, they shall go to every household twice. And under Disaster Act, we had a right to enter anybody's bedroom also. He may be anybody. Because they could be suspected COVID patient who can spread a virus. Under Pandemic Act, we have a right to enter anybody's home. 99.1% coverage. Twice we visited this homes. Rich is the rich, poor is the poor. He may be a former CM, he may be a sitting CM, everybody visited. So each our health workers carried a pamphlet 12 inches by 6 inches. On the backside, we had the telephone numbers of 24 ward war room, the directory for every household in Mumbai. Front side, we did do's and don'ts of COVID appropriate behavior. When a child goes to play in the ground, what all precautions you should take. When an elder goes for a morning walk, when a working member goes to office, how should he behave in public transport? How should he behave in office? When a homemaker goes to a mall or a shop, what should be her behavior? She shouldn't touch everything there. The entire family shouldn't go for shopping together. Only one person should go. Plus, we made SOPs like this, and we educated them. Then we checked body temperature and oxygen level of every family member. And 51,000 comorbids were taken out and put in hospitals. In this, my family, my responsibility. And then at the same time, then we warned them. We said, now look, we are telling you the folded hands not to come in public domain, come out in public domain without a mask. From 1st of November, if you start coming out, we're going to fine you. But we are going to fine you 200 rupees for every time we find you without a mask. You'll be surprised that between 1st November and 10th February, before the second wave struck us, in 100 days, we fined 27 lakh people. 2.7 million people fined, 54 crore rupees collected. I can challenge and claim there's no city in the world who has fined 2.7 million of its citizens in 3 months for not wearing a mask. So on one side, I had a huge amount of money, untied money with me now, and we would give them one mask free of cost, telling them not to come again without a mask. So this 27 lakh people must have affected the behavior of 1 crore people in their family. When they went back, they told their wife or husband or mother or father that today we were fined by police or by BMC and we had to pay fine. So this is the main reason why in the second wave, our figures didn't go beyond 11,000 on maximum peak day for the second wave, which was highly infectious. Whereas our neighboring Pune went to 18,000 in one single day. Other cities had more than 25,000 a day. But we went to 11,000, came back. Today in Mumbai, people may not be wearing masks properly. They may have masks on their chin. They may have masks in their neck. They may be having masks in their pocket. But you won't find anybody without a mask. So this campaign really helped us. And then we started a big drive. Mumbai is known for big hoardings. So we hired 800 hoardings, 18 feet by 6 feet. And we painted the city red with this campaign. My family, my responsibility, Maji Jawabdari, Maji Kutumbh Jawabdari, or Mera Parivar, Meri Zimmewari, in 3 different languages. And no mask, no campaign. We printed 20 lakh stickers and we pasted every shop, every mall, every private public office, every taxi, every bus, no mask, no entry. To create a fear psychosis that if I'm without a mask, I may not be allowed to enter a bus, I may not be allowed to enter a taxi, I may not be allowed to enter a shop. So and we had 4,000 buses of our own, BEST buses, which we had put huge stickers all around. No mask, no entry campaign was taken out very successfully. So and then now we are sustaining this campaign. Then we started Mahakasam, MAH, M for mask, A for Antar, in Marathi means distance, and H for hand sanitizer, Mahakasam. And now we started the campaign of I am responsibility, Main Zimmewar, Me Jawabdar, I am responsible. So we're sustaining this campaign. And citizens also are depicting much better COVID appropriate behavior because of this, and this is what will help us. So this social campaign also was a major success in BMC. And then now in the second wave, we got another issue of oxygen shortage. In the first wave from March 20 till December 20, not even one time in any forum, the word oxygen was talked about, uttered, or discussed, whether at the state level, district level, national level. Because in the first wave, nobody knew the importance of oxygen. But the second wave, when Maharashtra at one point of time had 600,000 COVID positives, and Mumbai on the 14th of April had 93,000 COVID positives. Today we have only 14,000 left now, out of which 9,000 are asymptomatic. So we had 93,000 at one time. And in the first week of April, we flagged this issue to the Honorable CM. We said, sir, Maharashtra produces only 1,200 tons of metric oxygen in a day, all put together, manufacturing. And today's our consumption is 950 tons on COVID only. And if you put non-COVID like C-section operations in maternity homes and things like that, its consumption is now 1050. So even if you make industrial consumption zero and even non-COVID large extent zero, but very soon our requirement may touch 1,600, 1,700 tons. So we need to import 500 tons of oxygen, even after allocating the entire 1,200 tons for COVID only. This was around 5th or 6th of April. And then we started corresponding and talking to Government of India for giving oxygen from other states. And when this was going on, a very unfortunate incident happened on the 17th of April night, when I got a SOS call from my team saying that 168 patients, 34 in ICU, will die next 2 hours because oxygen is going to finish in 6 hospitals. So I always salute my team. My team is fantastic. They are the best. At about 1 a.m., 200 ambulances were moving. And we picked up 168 of these patients, 34 in the ICUs. And luckily that day we had 850 oxygenated beds empty in jumbo hospitals. And we shifted between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. this 168 patients, and I'm happy to say not even one lost his life. So that was a major operation, and this is where I say teams are very important. Individuals cannot do much. Had we missed those 4 hours, there would have been 168 deaths. So the team morale and the team performance is the spinal cord to any success. And I must say that our team is really very motivated, and they did a great job. Similarly, when threat of cyclone Toki came on 17th of May this year, everybody told us, look, this is not going to hit Gujarat, Maharashtra is going to be safe. And but still we didn't play. We shifted 582 patients in our jumbo hospitals because actually they are temporary structures. They can't hold beyond 85 km/h wind speed. And we shifted them to Pakka structures. But ultimately, when this cyclone passed parallel to Mumbai, the wind speed was 130 km in Mumbai, slightly less than 160 in Gujarat, where it had a landfall. And it created a lot of havoc in Goa. Goa was without electricity for 2 days. It created a lot of destruction in Raigad, Ratnagiri. So Mumbai also was badly hit, but not even one person lost his life because the team BMC shifted a 582 of them without even warning, without even many people saying there's no need to shift. So teams are really very, very important when you have to perform in these critical times, and when we say that war is on.
Yeah.
So I think I have finished most of the points, and I think we can take a break now.
We'll take a 5-minute break, and but we also have some questions, and we will not.
Yeah, you're most welcome. I'll be very happy to answer.
We'll probably not be able to play all the 3 videos. So will you please tell us if we want to play?
Yeah, or you can show the videos later on, and after 5 minutes we start with the questions.
Sure. So we'll start at around 1 o'clock. Sir, that's okay with you?
Perfectly fine. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Again, switch
Sir,
on.
I've messaged on the group.
Yeah, switch on this from A38 to B29 and B30 to C19. Please switch on your videos. A38 to B29 and B30 to C19. We'll wait for sir.
Yeah.
Sir, I will call out the names of officers released and then ask you the question. Dilip Singh Shekhawat, please ask your question. Dilip Shekhawat. Kajal Javla, please ask the question.
Good afternoon, sir. Sir, I'm from the
Good afternoon.
Madhya Pradesh. So my
Hi,
question.
Kajal, how are you?
I'm doing good, sir. Thanks. So the success and reliability of any dashboard would depend upon the quality of data that is flowing in. So how did you ensure that there was a seamless collection of data from all the different sources like patient information and hospital data? And also, how did you ensure that it was in a prescribed format so that it needed very less manual intervention?
A very good question. We had created Google Excel sheets for all our 182 hospitals. And now just the electronics part of it or IT part of it itself is not sufficient condition to get the goal achieved. We, as far as government hospitals are concerned, I mentioned that these young IAS officers, they were made in charge that every data, whether it is of patient getting discharged, getting admitted, or other type of data which we may be asked for, the stock of medicines which is available or not. So this was being driven by young IAS officers who were made in charge of the war rooms of these hospitals. We have 40 BMC and government-run hospitals in Mumbai. As far as private was concerned, the private hospitals are already, since they are top of the line hospitals in the country, they have a very robust IT system prevailing there, and we have to tap that, and for that we put our own officials in every hospital. Like I said, every hospital today is manned by 2 municipal auditors from BMC who sit there. One of the roles is to ensure that patients are not overcharged and bills are vetted before they're released. But besides that, they also keep an eye on discharges, on admissions, on medicine stocks, and other issues which as and when they arise. So it is all backed by the manpower deployment and each and every hospital of these in Mumbai.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Rahul Jain, please ask a question.
Good morning, sir. I'm Rahul from
morning.
Rajasthan Cadre.
Hi, Rahul.
Sir, yes, sir. Sir, as we have seen in this ongoing pandemic, sir, there are a lot of medicines which are used which are not proven clinically proven. And nowadays, we are seeing new kind of post-COVID complications coming up. Even my father also got COVID, and I'm seeing this kind of trends coming up. So, sir, what is BMC planning to tackle this thing now? Because this is also a new thing which we need to look upon, sir. Thank you.
That way, I'm very fortunate that our Honorable Chief Minister, Honorable Uddhav Thackeray, sir, he created a state task force way back last March. And it had 12 top doctors of the country based in Mumbai in the private sector. Like you have Dr. Udwadia, who's #1 in the world anywhere in nephrology. You are Dr. Shashank Joshi, you are Dr. Sanjay Oak, you are Rahul Pandit, you are Dr. Praful Desai. They are all like experts or the best in their field available. And the state task force was given this assignment of patient treatment protocol and to take care of this medical issues on a dynamic basis. And as a municipal commissioner, I have access to them 24/7. I can talk to them and take their advice. And same is true of my deans. So I'm in constant touch with them, whether some new medicine is to be introduced or they themselves keep on advising me. So this state task force idea is very good. And now recently we have the Honorable CM sir has formed a pediatric task force, 1 dozen doctors. Now for example, the pediatric task force has created home treatment protocol for children who may be home quarantined in the 3rd wave. They have made patient treatment protocol if the child of 1 or 2 years come with mother to the hospital. So in Maharashtra and Mumbai in particular, this burden is taken over by the state medical task force, who virtually meet every evening, and they advise us which medicines to be used or not. For example, now, and they also tell us in advance which medicine we should keep procurement ready. For example, right now, this monoclonal thing, the cocktail thing, which is costing 65,000 rupees for one dose, and every person needs 2 doses. You will be surprised that these stocks are already in place with us. And whether it was a remdesivir, whether it was tocilizumab, whether it was a favipiravir, we were the first in the country to procure these medicines, because we get well in advance notice from these task force where we should look for. And whether it is now mucormycosis, or whether it is the future potential threat of pediatric wave, we bank upon the advice of our state task force.
Thank you, sir. Ayushi Singh, please ask your question.
Good afternoon, sir. Thank you for a very
Good afternoon.
insightful lecture, sir. I am Ayushi from Maharashtra Cadre. Sir, my question is regarding the, like you mentioned, sir, that cooperation between the private and public hospitals and the administration was seamless, sir. But sir, a lot of norms were imposed on the hospitals regarding, say, reporting of death audits, and then maintaining transparency regarding bed availability, sir. And at the same time, sir, we've observed there is a lot of fatigue in the medical fraternity also, because they've gotten through personal losses due to the pandemic also. So, sir, how did we secure their cooperation in this matter, sir? Personal relations apart, sir, I feel like some sort of apart from incentives, sir, some sort of system would be there to secure their cooperation fully, sir.
Yeah. So I'll answer your question in 2 parts. You know, last year, we, on the 6th of June, one day what happened that we have one Sabaya Medical College in Mumbai, it's a private medical college. And I would see the mortality figures of hospitals, I'll glance through them. So I found that 16 people died in the hospital on the previous day. I said, normally these hospitals have a ICU of 10 or 12 or 15. How can 16 people die in one day in one hospital? So then I said, I want a report on this. And next day I was told, sir, that this is not one day death. Yesterday only one person had died, but deaths of March, April, and May are being reported now. Then suddenly it hit me that this may be true of hundreds of hospitals in Mumbai. And then I was told that there are deaths at home also, because in March last year, we had only 2 labs in Maharashtra, one Kasturba lab in Mumbai and Naidu lab in Pune. 2 labs for entire state of Maharashtra, 12 crore people. So a lot of people may have passed away at home only without the swab collected, reported and come for 10 days. So we did a massive exercise. Again, I'm proud to say that we are the, maybe I haven't heard a second city doing this exercise. We took out death certificates, because death certificates are issued by ward officers. So I told ward officers that all death certificates we issued between 1st of March and say that day was 7th of June. 7th of June, you take them out and compare with ICMR names, because the moment the swab is taken, your name comes on the ICMR this portal. And common names must separate, whether they have passed away in hospital, whether they have passed away at home, or whether they were passed away at on transit to the hospital, somebody died on the way and he was taken back from there only. This comparison would take out the list out. You know, you will be surprised that we got 862 such deaths on the 12th of June. And I went to our Honorable Chief Minister. I said, sir, look, we have found 862 people who have either died at home, and these are people whose swabs were taken, but before the reports came, they passed away, or they died away when they were on transit to the hospital, or they passed in the hospital like Somaya, where they're not reporting on time. First of all, we issued orders that henceforth, within 48 hours, if any death is not reported by the hospital in a prescribed format to the epic cell of BMC, so we will get after that hospital and they will risk losing their license, because you have to use carrot and stick policy. And secondly, my Honorable CM was so brave. He said, Chahal, don't worry. Why should we hide deaths? You declare them in one go. On 16th of June, we declared 862 deaths in one single day. and the death rate shot up to 8%, 8.5%. But later on, the Washington Post, in the month of August, they say that there's only one city with transparent data in the country, because they were sniffing around, they couldn't find any additional death which was not reported. So that brings in a lot of credibility in the longer run to you. It may be a short-term gain of hiding these figures, but long-term you lose. You are a loser. Now coming to our relationship with private hospitals, even they also number one, they were convinced by our credibility and our honesty, because normally they had a different opinion about the government and the BMC sector of hospitals. Now here I must tell you something you may or may not like it. As all of you IS officers, they are the leaders everywhere they go. Wherever you are going, you are heading some organization. As a SDM, you will head a subdivision. As a collector, you had a district. As the MD of a corporation, you head the corporation. As health secretary or as secretary, you will head that particular department. So you are always at the head, somewhere or the other. Now it is very, very important, and I must request you that we have to be the most humble of the lot. And normally it is the other way around. And this humility and being humble, it works wonders. People like top doctors and highly qualified personalities, they are hungry of respect, which many times they don't get it, especially from the IS fraternity. So we have to be extra humble, and you will be the biggest beneficiary if you show this extra kind of humility. It may be difficult, but over a period of time, it does come to you. And you will not believe that whenever I talk to my dean of a KM or Nair or Sion or Cooper hospital, I have these are BMC owned medical colleges for the last 100 years plus. As a municipal commissioner, I have got such sweeping powers. I can dismiss them, I can suspend them, I can do anything, and the buck stops with me. No minister, nobody is required to ratify my decision, but I serve them. First of all, if they seek my appointment, I get them. I give it immediately. If they come to see me, I call them in a second. I get up and receive them. And whenever I send an SMS to them or WhatsApp to them that so and so patient is seriously, I always serve them. It doesn't cost me much, but they are so carried away by this behavior. And similarly, private hospitals. All this private hospital, whenever any doctor calls, I said, let me not respect him for any other reason, but for the simple reason that is highly qualified. He has worked his way up. Like my deans of my hospitals, they have got 3, 4 degrees from America, Europe. They're so well educated. So how does it matter if I serve them? So this has been a sea change, a game changer in Mumbai. And yesterday I went to Breach Candy to see a patient of mine, a friend of mine. There were 20 doctors around me. They need not be around me, but they respect me because I respect them. And I would make a very humble appeal to all of you that the more humble you are in your conduct, at whatever position you are one of the biggest beneficiaries, and the next beneficiary is going to be society at large. The systems start happening, things start happening, and people won't believe that this is the main plank on which the relationship is standing today. And I don't remember even once that I have not addressed any private doctor also in these hospitals without serving them. But it has paid rich dividends to me personally, and we have gelled in so well now. And plus another thing, this is one part. Secondly, as a municipal commissioner, I have a lot of authority, a lot of power, and I can get a lot of things. So these doctors from 35 major hospitals, they keep on calling me for small petty work here and there. So I make it a point that every phone call is returned, and every work wherever possible has to be done. And I take care of their small issues on a war footing, and I try to have 100% strike rate when they raise their problem, their personal problem, or their family problem, or their hospital problem to me. So I make it a point that I should not give them an opportunity because then they will hit me somewhere else if I don't respond. So this has really built up this relationship. But I always say that between two human beings, if one can understand that what other human being wants from you, what he desires from you, and what all is possibly you can do for him, that psychological reading of that other man can see you through to a lot of issues. And I really say with a lot of conviction that my relationship with the private hospital is outstanding, and it's going to be a lifelong relationship. It's not a matter for pandemic. They have now become family members. They have become friends, and they are just part of the family now. These doctors fraternity, and ultimately this war is being fought by doctors and nurses and paramedicals. So we must give them due credit for that, and we must stand by them. So this type of attitude, or this type of a response to their issues and addressing their issues and giving them due credit and respect, it can be a game changer.
Thank you so much, sir. Sir, briefly, can you elaborate on the role of the epidemic cell also, sir?
Yeah, epidemic cell is very important because that is the single contact point between 182 hospitals and BMC headquarters. For example, if anybody dies, the Pandemic Act of 1898, it clearly specifies that huge file has to be created, his death certificate, his patient treatment record, his COVID positive reports. So many documents are there in that file which come, and unless that file is prepared and sent to Epic Cell, we cannot officially declare the death. And this is what is happening. And this is what is actually happening in many cities, that there's a lag of declaration of death and actual death happening, because this paperwork takes time. So Epic Cell plays that very important role of acting as a conduit for this to happen. Then Epic Cell also is involved in all data collection, like today, how many people came positive, how many deaths have occurred, how many high-risk contacts been traced. Our dashboard is there on public domain. It is in 36 pages. That is maintained by Epic Cell. Then zero services are conducted by Epic Cell. Then Epic Cell also plays a very important role in our linkage with NIV labs and study of various mutants, virus. And at least in the month of December, we had an issue of UK mutant coming to India. So the Epic Cell only, which was in the front line. So all this clinical work is done by Epic Cell.
Anand Kumar Sharma, please ask your question.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, Anand.
Sir, my question is that since this COVID has come up, so there are many non-COVID patients with severe chronic illnesses like heart disease, diabetes, cancer patients. So they have been suffering due to lack of availability and hospitals we use for COVID facilities. So any such step was taken to take care of these patients, or any measures are taken to take care of these patients, sir?
You know, I missed saying this. Good, you reminded me that 8th of March 2020 till today, since I joined, not even one bed in any hospital was converted from non-COVID to COVID. Primarily because we created 9,200 brand new beds in jumbo hospitals, which were 100% COVID only. But we haven't converted non-COVID beds to COVID beds. And now we're adding 6,500 more beds in 4 new jumbos in the next 3 to 4 weeks time. Then we'll have 15,700 beds in jumbos only, in open playground, greenfield hospitals. And primarily because of this, we never required conversion of non-COVID bed to COVID bed. And you can check out from the sources that in Mumbai, the non-COVID activities have gone in full throttle throughout, because we didn't compromise on non-COVID beds.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Ankit, please ask your question.
Good afternoon, sir. I am Ankit from Maharashtra Cadre.
Sir,
I have a question similar to what Anand asked. So basically, the way we have used IEC campaigns for preventing COVID cases using good hygiene practices, how can a similar approach be used for preventing non-COVID cases or NCDs?
Very good question. You know, see, For example, we launched a sanitization campaign also in slums of Mumbai, and our health workers would, when they would visit these slums, 15,000 of them every day in May, June, July, August, September, and we would tell them the importance of hygiene, the importance of sanitization, and we were over sanitizing the slums. We were cleaning them up 5 times in a day. And you will be surprised that last year, because of this campaign, Mumbai has a terrible monsoon right from June till October. And we used to have large number of malaria, dengue, and leptospirosis deaths. And last year, the malaria cases came down by 85%. We had only 15% cases as compared to the previous year last year. And Mumbai had only one death only of malaria last year, and 0 death because of dengue. So this is the great indirect benefits which came out of our IEC campaign and plus sanitization process, that maybe first time it happened that Mumbai had 0 dengue death, and the number of malaria incident cases fell by 85%.
Thank you, sir.
Rupesh, please ask the question.
Good afternoon, sir. Sir, I'm Rupesh from Agmut Kaida. Sir, this pandemic has imposed another challenge of disposing medical waste like PPE kits, masks, etc. Sir, can you throw a little bit of light on that, how you handle the same?
Yeah, we are first of all, to help the hospitals, we had because hospitals also under a lot of stress to properly collect the biomedical waste, segregate it, and keep it safe. So we said per patient, 255 rupees per day can be charged by any private hospital as for disposing medical waste expenditure. So they gave them this cushion. So if a patient has stayed for 10 days in a hospital, so in his bill, 2,500 rupees will be reflected as biomedical waste charges. And then secondly, we had immediately appointed an agency for biomedical waste disposal for the entire city of Mumbai way back last March. And we would get roughly about 34 tons of biomedical waste every day. And we had created a SOP and a mechanism to properly dispose it off. So with these tie-ups, we didn't face any problem at all of biomedical waste disposal.
Thank you, sir.
Meenal, please ask the question.
Good afternoon, sir. I'm Meenal, born on the Maharashtra cadre. Sir, my question is that when we look at Mumbai and its success of this system that BMC had set, I mean, when it comes down to us as new officers on field, I mean, how do you ensure that these systems do not disintegrate into person-dependent setups? I mean, how do you ensure that monitoring, and how do you ensure that leadership on field?
Yeah, like I always say that systems must be on autopilot. This must be institutionalized. Now, for example, in Mumbai, this pandemic may go away, but the ward war room has become an institution. I'll give you a few examples of how it become an institution. Like in the month of December and Jan, and then February, and then I also add also March also. When vaccination started on 16th of February in the country for health workers and frontline workers, the CoWIN app was not functioning properly, and it had a lot of teething problems. So the war room took over, and like for example, we had online list of our 300,000 frontline workers and roughly 1.5 lakh health workers. So the war room, these 240 dashboards started calling up these health workers and frontline workers and informing them that tomorrow your vaccination is, this is the center, you must come over. And we started doing 40,000, 50,000 vaccination per day, even when the CoWIN app was not able to give us appointments. Similarly, now whether you have monsoon-related diseases, whether you have threat of a cyclone, we had 3 threats of cyclone last 3rd June. then last 5th August, and this 16th, 17th of May. So in all these 3 threats of cyclone, it was the ward war rooms which were acting as a disaster rooms for that area. And so now this is one example how those ward war rooms, they have become permanent feature of BMC. They won't go away with the pandemic being over or Mr. Chahal being replaced by some other municipal commission later on. They will be institutionalized and they will keep on facing new and new challenges as and then they may come. So, so whether it's our Project Victory of dialysis portal, whether it is you say our these ward war rooms, so they all are already institutionalized, and irrespective of the individual, they will continue to function. And as an IS officer, it is our sacred duty that wherever we function, where we perform, it should not be individually run systems, because they always disappear when you disappear from that chair. If you do something, always try to institutionalize your concept and try to make it work in autopilot. Then when we look back after 10 years, you'll find that your system is still running.
Thank you so much for addressing the officer trainees today and very patiently answering all the questions. Sir, it has been one of the better lectures that we have had in this phase 2, and thank you for sharing how Mumbai has coped up with the COVID pandemic. I'm sure it will help us all, especially with the pandemic that's lying on all of us even today. Thank you so much for spending time, sir. I express a warm and heartfelt vote of thanks to you on behalf of Labasna and officer trainees of IS 2019 batch. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. But let me add, please give me 2 more minutes. I would make a very humble appeal and a prayer to all of you that be very optimistic, be very positive, and be very brave. This service gives us a lot of protection and to be brave. And unless you have risk appetite, unless you're brave, nothing gets delivered. And be optimistic, never be pessimist. Being optimistic itself takes care of the problem to a large extent. And if you are positive, if you're optimistic, if you have a risk-taking appetite, you can do wonders. You'll never forget this sentence even after 20 years when you look back and what you've done. But if you are not optimistic, if you're not positive, then things don't work out. And as a public service, I must tell you that we must ensure that anybody coming to you, and you will have hundreds of people coming to you every day when you are working as district collectors, when you're working in the field, try to say that if 10 people are coming to me, let me try to help 10 out of 10 of them. If that is your approach, definitely 5, 6, 7 will get benefited. And like somebody coming in front of you, you must say that I have to help him out, and then things start working out. So this is what is required in public service. And unless we have that kind of approach, things so difficult. There's so many problems. Every problem which comes to me has wheel within wheels. It is so difficult to deliver. It's not easy to help somebody, and it's not easy to deliver in public domain when you have multiple pressures working always around you, and there are all kinds of people around you. But unless you have these attributes, only then things can work out. And let me tell you, the kind of happiness, the kind of satisfaction you get in helping a fellow human being, it cannot be described. It can only be felt over a period of time. Like I always make it a point to say, like I have the cell phone with me. I tell my people, a lot of people I said, if somebody can clone my cell phone, there would be at least 200 WhatsApp messages unknown here, which are not recorded from whom they come. But I had created a system. I said, because when people were dying, they would ring up, send me a WhatsApp, unknown, sir, my mother is dying, my father is dying, please get me ICU bed, get me ventilator bed, please get me hospital. So I had created a system. I had a core team. Whenever that WhatsApp would come, I'll simply forward it in 2 seconds to my team. And within 10, 20, 30 minutes, I'll get a reply, sir, bed allotted, so and so place, patient informed. And we created a format. And by the time, and in few days, people, whole Mumbai knew that they have to write patient's name, they have to write patient's relative name and a cell number, because relative have to be informed. So if that is written, my forwarding WhatsApp message, bed is allotted and patient is informed. You know, if I have received 200 messages, all 200 are answered. The strike rate is 100%. And I have not stored those numbers even till today also, because they're not known to me. And let me tell you something else. Now, if you read those messages, after 15 days, 20 days, 25 days, the next message has come. It says, sir, thank you very much. My mother, my father, my husband, my wife, or my sister, or my brother, we have got discharged today, and you have saved his life. And not only this, I have at least 15 more WhatsApp messages out of those 200 where somebody has replied to me, yes, sir, my father has passed away, he's died, but thank you very much. You gave us the bed. So even those messages are there. But only I know what kind of satisfaction you get when people respond like this. It is, nothing can match this happiness. So if you are a public officer, you must help public. And that has to be your focal point of your life, good of public. If that happens, then you don't need to tell people, the world will start talking about you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for
Thank
your.
you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
sir. Thank you, sir.
All the best. Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, sir.